Well, when we finished our last video, we were discussing food as an energy source that is needed to meet the demands of our resting metabolism, our activity, and our digestive processes. We noted that all foods fall into four categories: protein, carbohydrates, fats, and alcohol, and that these four collectively are called macronutrients. This is to distinguish them from micronutrients, which are minerals and vitamins, which are very important, but don't supply any energy and calories to meet our body's needs. Each of the four macronutrients have the potential, when absorbed out of our intestines, to be converted into energy, calories of energy that can be used throughout the body. Proteins, when digested, provide 4 calories per gram of protein. Carbohydrates, when digested, also provide 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. Alcohol, when absorbed and metabolized, produces 7 calories of energy per gram absorbed. And fats are the greatest supplier of energy, providing 9 calories per gram after absorption from our intestines. These numbers help us understand why many diets recommend a very low intake of fat in our food to promote fat loss when an energy deficit state is desired. This should be true in most cases, but there are other factors to consider. Turns out that we human beings are not quite like an automobile, which we fill up with gas and drive for thousands of miles without doing any routine maintenance. The human body, which also requires fuel, is a living, dynamic entity that undergoes constant remodeling and turnover of structural tissues, which it excretes in waste products in urine and stool. This loss of largely protein waste products demands a nearly constant influx of protein to allow for repair and replenishing of structural materials that are used up each day in the process of being alive. We can measure such waste products in our urine and predict with some accuracy how much protein would have to be consumed to keep the repair of the body up to date and keep the body in optimal health. Almost all human beings lose the urea that is produced from the breakdown of 50 to 100 grams of structural protein per day. That's equivalent to 7 to 14 ounces of flesh foods like meat, dairy products, and eggs. This is then the basic requirement for all human beings, even before we begin to calculate the energy needs for our bodies in calories. Numerous studies have shown that when we do not consume the basic amount of protein that's needed to replenish what is broken down in a day, we begin to lose our lean tissues, including internal organs, muscles, and bones, with loss of only minimal amounts of the fat stores upon which we were counting to cover our deficits. For this reason, low-calorie diets must contain at least a minimal amount of protein to cover basic structural needs, or fat will not be lost as we'd planned. Experiences with hospitalized patients many years ago showed clearly that patients with energy deficits had to receive protein first, followed by energy from carbohydrates and fats, if health was to be maintained in those who were not able to eat during the time they spent in the hospital. While protein is certainly capable of providing energy at 4 calories per gram, it must be considered to be first and foremost a provider of structural support, and secondarily as an energy source. We should all remember that when we reduce our energy intake in hopes of using up our fat as an energy source, protein must be supplied in our diet first, or additional energy will not come from our fat stores. Instead, the energy will come from our bones, our muscles, and our internal organs, not what we were intending at all. The correlate of this, of course, is that if we meet our body's protein needs first, any remaining energy deficits will be obtained from our body's fat storage, and our primary dietary plans will be accomplished. One other important process occurs when we human beings decide that we want to use up some of our fat. As we cut back on our calories of energy consumed from any of the 4 macronutrients, our bodies do a rather strange thing to try to save us from starvation. The moment our bodies know that we're in an energy deficit state, from either metabolism activity or digestion calories exceeding what food we take in, our resting metabolic rate begins to decrease. It's as if our central nervous system is saying, this guy's going to waste away and die if he doesn't eat some food. We need to decrease the number of calories demanded by our cells for a while until more food's available. Obviously, the metabolic rate doesn't totally disappear, but it's been shown to decrease by as much as 21% when we begin to cut back on our food energy calories. So a human being on a diet is a little bit like a bear that's in hibernation for the winter. Those of us who want to use up some of our body fat stores must first increase our dietary protein intake to cover the basic maintenance needs of the body. Having done this, we then need to cut back on our intake of calories coming from carbohydrates, fats, and alcohol, so as to create a need for utilization of our fat stores for energy. As we cut back on our intake of these macronutrients, we need to remember always that our goal is never to lose muscle or bone, or heart, or liver, or kidneys. Protein waste products like urea in our urine actually increase as we cut back on our intake of carbs, fats, and alcohol. This helps us realize the importance of keeping our protein intake relatively high whenever we're attempting to lose body fat. It would be wise at this point, I guess, to discuss how much of an energy deficit is necessary to lose a known amount of fat. In other words, if I want to lose 1 pound of my fat, how much deficit would I have to create by undereating macronutrients? The answer is that 1 pound of fat loss requires a deficit of about 3,500 calories of energy. Now, either of that doesn't sound fair, because a 3,500 calorie deficit is difficult to accomplish. I always say God didn't make it easy for us to lose fat. For example, a 150-pound woman who walks 1 mile expends 100 calories in her efforts. She would have to walk 35 miles to lose 1 pound of fat from her body. Obviously, losing weight by increasing activity alone without some change in dietary intake of calories of energy is very difficult. Creating a 3,500 calorie deficit with dietary manipulation alone is equally difficult. For example, if an individual's metabolic rate plus basic activity calories plus digestion was about 1,800 calories a day, a diet that contained only 1,300 calories per day of energy would require 7 days to lose 1 pound of stored fat. That's only 4 pounds of fat in a month. Most of us would not have the kind of patience necessary to adhere to a 1,300 calorie diet for even a few days, let alone many weeks. The truth is that it's difficult to lose fat stores, which are designed to meet our body's need during times of poor food intake. Sadly, we often accumulate too much stored fat, and it can cause a variety of diseases when it's stored in abundance in the wrong places. So, what's a wrong location for fat storage? Turns out that fat is stored in the central abdomen is much more likely to be associated with diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol levels than is fat that's stored on the hips and thighs. Central abdominal fat storage raises insulin levels, and elevated insulin levels are the beginning point of type 2 diabetes. There are books that have been written about different shaped bodies and risks of disease. Those with bodies shaped like pears may not be very happy with their fat storage, but they have far fewer disease problems than do individuals with bodies shaped like apples. Well, is there an amount of fat that's particularly harmful stated as a percentage of body weight? I don't really think so, because the location of the fat is so important and so different genetically from person to person. We know through measuring body composition that there are ranges of fat storage by percentage that are likely to be healthy or likely to be unhealthy. First of all, there are significant differences between men and women in ideal body fat content. Women store fat on their hips and their breasts, and none of this fat has any negative impact on health. Men are much more likely to store fat in their central abdomen and not on their hips and thighs. A healthy percent fat for a man is therefore much lower than a healthy percent fat for a woman. The range of healthy fat storage for women using DEXA technology is usually considered to be 32 to 38% of body weight. But a healthy fat percent for men is generally much lower, 22 to 27%. I want you to remember, however, that even fatness within these ranges can sometimes be associated with disease. And often a trial of a loss of body fat can lead to remission of the disease, even when there wasn't a lot of stored fat. Well, we've had 3 comprehensive videos now dedicated to the management of body fat stores. Almost all of us have the capacity to store some fat, and many of us will become ill because of storing too much fat. We therefore have to be educated, accountable, and have good tools to use to allow us to have healthy body composition. Some of the education, of course, is what we've been discussing. Knowledge is strength in this arena. All of us have difficulty with accountability, and we all think that we can do this thing by ourselves. My own experience would suggest that this may be true for some rare individuals, but most of us need someone or some system to whom we can be accountable to help manage intake of energy calories and to create deficits that result in loss of our body fat stores without loss of good tissue. The good news is that there are many people, many programs, and systems available to help support our weight loss efforts, including dietitians, nutrition counselors, fitness advocates, online programs, accountability tools for managing weight. Losing body fat's challenging, but the problem is not hopeless. It's simply difficult, and it requires a lifetime of hard work. So, in summary, when we wish to lose fat from our bodies to prevent disease or treat diseases which are already present, we need to do the following. Number one, raise our dietary protein intake. There are two reasons for that, right? One is to increase the digestion calories required to process the protein. The second is to replace the protein that's used up and excreted in our waste daily. Number two, raise our activity calories to a level that allows us to create energy deficits. Daily activity is critical to the maintenance of fat loss over time. Number three, we've got to reduce our intake of carbohydrates, fats, and alcohol in an effort to create energy deficits between intake and expenditure. Number four, let's increase our intake of insoluble fibers, which may dilute out our nutrients and may decrease absorption of energy calories from our foods. Number five, let's eliminate all medications that could slow down our metabolic rate or decrease heat generation. Your physician will have to help you with this. Number six, be accountable to somebody or some system that will allow you to be successful both in losing fat and maintaining ideal body composition. Thank you for taking time to watch this series on managing body fat stores. I'll look forward to seeing you again soon.